Hello, everybody. We'll get started in just a few moments. Hello, Lynn. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for what
Awesome.
you have in store for us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is so exciting.
Yes, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. How's everyone doing? I wonder.
Yeah, where's everybody from? Let us know in the chat.
Yep. I kind of want to see the chat. Let me open it. Oh, wow. Thank you guys for coming. This is so exciting.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending.
Hi.
All right.
Wow,
Looks like
Texas,
we have a
Seattle,
full
everywhere.
room.
Oh my gosh.
We'll go ahead and get started. Lynn, thanks
Sure.
again so much for being here.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
My name's Shireen Faridnia. I'm part of the Wacom community team. Welcome, everybody. This will be a 1-hour session. We will leave the last 10 minutes for Q&A, but I will also be asking Lynn some questions here and there throughout her demo. We ask that you please use the Q&A feature, and avoid the chat and hand raising for questions. Due to time constraints, only some of the questions will be answered in the Q&A, but we will be sure to get to all of them. And this Zoom session will be recorded and a YouTube link will be forwarded to all attendees after this session.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. It'll be nice to hear your voice as well. If you have any questions, leave the comments or leave the question in the Q&A. We'll try to get all of it.
Yes.
We'll try.
Here's where to follow Lynn. She's on Instagram, Facebook, and ArtStation. She has so much cute art. Please go follow Lynn.
Thank you.
And we also have some great promos. We will also be displaying this slide at the end of the session. But without further ado, Lynn, take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sharon. Alrighty, let me share my screen first. One sec. All right. So hi everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Uh, first of all, for some of you guys who's not familiar with my work, I want to introduce myself a little bit. I'm Lynn. I'm originally from China. Currently, I live in LA and I work as a visual development artist at Warner Brothers Animation. Before this, I was working as a senior concept artist for a social game company. That was actually 4 years working in games. Right now, I'm just newly moved down to animation. So it's a new journey for me. Today, I want to talk about personal work and personal growth. You know, like when you are actually there in work every day, it's hard for you to spend extra time to do some daily exercise or creating something of your own, because I know, like, for us, we all love drawing. We all started somewhere. I don't know if you guys still remember, like, maybe when you were little, you were doodling in class, you know, you're just like, it's just fun, just purely, you know, you're just enjoying the process. I think that's such an important thing for us, especially right now, you're taking art more seriously as a career. Sometimes it gets a little bit more, you know, it's like you're just doing it as work, but not necessarily for fun. So I think it's very important for us sometimes to step back a little bit and creating something of your own. Today I wanna first show you guys some of my old artwork. This is gonna be embarrassing, but I think it's important because we all come from somewhere. First of all, I'm gonna show some of my work stuff from my previous job. So I worked for this company called FunPlus. It's a Chinese-owned company, and they were making a Facebook online game. So it's actually a farming game. To be honest, I wasn't super excited with the project when I jumped on board. I was just so glad I got a job out of school, you know. But as I worked on this project, I become more and more attached to it because they really give me a lot of freedom to explore what I wanted to explore. So I was actually doing a lot of like game panels. So it's like, you know, it's a social game. They push new content every week, every month, and year round. So it's a lot of content to create. So that gave me a lot of opportunities to explore like different themes, different color palette, like for Easter, for New Year, for Halloween, for everything. So every time when I get a new subject or a new task, I was really excited. So I would go online, do a lot of research and searching for color palette, what kind of composition I want to use. It was actually very fun because you know, some of the content actually gets repeat over time, but that really pushes me to think about how I can make it different. Let's say if I would have a winter scene, I want to make it more warm and welcoming. And if it's a cold winter night, you know, it could still have some warm light to generate a mood that feels welcoming and in a way. So like over the years, I probably did, I don't know, like probably over 100 of those panels, like different underwater scene, camping, desert. So it was a lot of it's like production work, but I was really enjoying it. And during the process, I actually developed my own way of coming up with different color palette and theme. So I would usually, if I got a new quest, I would start looking for reference, but with purpose. So one purpose is to find the right mood and color inspirations. I call it mood board. In that step, you can see, this is a final panel, of course, but I was thinking a lot more about like what kind of color I want to use. It's more Easter, definitely I want more like a pastel color and fresh green kind of color, but also like all the smaller elements where I could add in the image. I would create another, I call it idea board. So it's basically a lot of props you could add in there, things like that. So that became my process over the years. I find it's very useful for me. I know we all use reference differently, but I feel like dividing all the reference into like color palette and ideas, that actually helps me from just copying from the reference image directly. It actually helped me to bring all the ideas together and compose within a unified color palette, if that makes sense. So for example, even with the subject I'm familiar with, like for this one, it's Chinese New Year, right? I still spend some time looking for reference just to get into the right mood and then look for some fun small elements where I could add more stuff in the scene. So yeah, that was my work stuff from my previous job. And actually most of this were from like probably 2015, 2016. So it's been a while. But I realized when I look back, I still hold on to some of the method I was using because I did learn a lot from just doing a lot of this kind of work. So move on to personal projects. How did this get started? Actually, because I was working with FunPlus, I was working every day. It was sometimes because the amount of work, I ended up working overtime. Every day after work, I barely have any energy to do any personal work at all. After a couple of years, I just feel so burnt out because yeah, you can learn a lot from work, but sometimes you will hit a plateau or a bottleneck. During that time, what do you do? How do you find a breakthrough? So for me, for a long time, I couldn't draw anything. I feel very frustrated. I just feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. What do I do? I can't draw anything other than my work stuff. Whatever I try, I just feel like it really sucks in a way. So I was talking with my friend, and she was my friend Tian. She's actually a really great artist as well. She was telling me, you know, you have a corgi at home. You love corgi, you know, like why not just do that? That's what you love, what you're good at. So I started just putting some ideas there. Here are some of the early corgi illustration I did. Hopefully you guys can still see the screen. So yeah, it wasn't anything too specific. Sometimes I just had this idea. For example, this one, we were watching Game of Thrones, I think, back then. Like, whoa, what if like white walkers, you know, like what if it's a white corgi? So I was really having fun with it, but it was nothing I didn't have an idea in mind how I wanted to create a personal project until I think a few years ago. You know, there are a lot of challenges online now on Instagram and all the social media, like Mermaid, like Inktober, and all that. I think it's a great way to jump on board and just to try it and see how far you can push yourself. So this was one year I was doing Mermaid. So you draw a mermaid every day during May. So it was a fun challenge. I think I'll give it a try. So this is actually just me drawing, just kind of creative for fun. You know, there's nothing too precious about it, because I realized this kind of challenges, you could do it every day and you don't have to take it too serious, because it's just for fun. There's no review, there's no client feedbacks. So you could do however you want. So it's like, I feel like from doing this every day, it really helps me think about what you wanted to create, especially with a theme. And it kind of helps you to just narrow down the direction where you wanted to go and just focus on the thing and think about how you can take it from there. But of course, I get distracted easy. I can't say I have the best focused on one thing, just doing it repeatedly. So I was doing Mermaid until the third or fourth day, and this happened. So I was like, yeah, I can do corgi, right? So corgi, how can I combine corgi with mermaid? So yeah, this image came out. I think I was really having fun with it. Can you guys still see me?
Yep, we can see you, Lynn.
Okay, just make sure. Thanks, Jen.
No problem.
Yeah, and so when this image happens, it just happens. So it's like, yeah, this is actually really fun. I started doing more of this. So just like how a dog and the fish could combine together and become something like we haven't seen before, but it's more fun and it's just interesting in a different way, I guess. I feel like every time I had an idea and I draw it out, that actually makes me feel like I accomplished something. So because this challenge is like every day, it really but of course I was still working at that time, it really forces me to think about how to arrange my time. So it's just like the first week I got in a habit of, like in the morning I will walk my dog, and then I start thinking about what ideas I could draw today. Maybe, you know, like later on I'm thinking, oh, this morning I really want bacon. So what a corgi do with the bacon? So I have the bacon bending power corgi kind of image come up. What I would do is usually if I have the idea, I will sketch it out. I would do some very rough sketch in the morning before I start working. I could show you guys some of my sketches later, but they're just like super rough. It's basically just a note for myself, knowing where I want to put the subject and roughly the composition. And then to a point, I got kind of excited about it. So, okay, I gotta get work done first. So let me put this aside. after I finish the work every day, at night, I will come back and knowing I could just paint it for fun. And you could watch a movie or listening to podcasts or watch a show and just doodling it, finishing it up. So that was my routine for a long time. Having this routine actually helps me a lot just to produce a lot more ideas out there. So I was doing a lot more corgis, then some sidekicks characters just happen. I think the good thing about doing personal work is that you have full control of it. But all the good ideas doesn't come the first day. It takes some time to cook, let's put it that way, just because let's say right now I have this character, the corgi, and his friends, the 3 hamsters, but they're not there from the first day. It comes from like weird mermaid drawing, and then later mermaid corgi fish, and then later adding a little bit more friends. So it takes some time to evolve, which I think it's very important for us to create the personal project, because as long as when you're getting more familiar with the subject, you started to push more, see how you can make it more fun, more interesting. If you have some new ideas, you could take the character or subject that you're already familiar with and put them in a story scenario, and to just push a little bit more and see where you can get. I think that's the importance of doing personal work, because as long as you're getting comfortable, then you can kind of push yourself and reach out a little bit more, try something different. That's how you evolve. So as you can see, after I got this 3 hamster there, I realized they are actually really easy to use, because you can pop them anywhere. They're just there, but doing fun things. One thing about creating characters or creating an image, I think it's very important to tell a story. If you just draw a character standing there with a very stiff pose, it's less appealing than you engage your audience and think about what kind of story you want to tell. So for now, like I kind of develop a method where you have the main character and then you have the side character, and how would they interact with each other? If they're laying on a beach, what would they do? They're not just all sitting there with the same pose, right? They have different personality. They have different things they wanted to do. So that's something you could explore. And more, that's the yoga corgi and more. So up to this point, I feel like very comfortable. I have this character that I created, and right now I could just like have all the freedom to play with them. If I have an idea, let's say I saw a post office, the little cart up there. Say, oh, what are my characters? If I have all the characters, what would they do if they're doing the job? You know, they could have fun. I think the thing is having a personal project. Of course, not everyone likes to draw corgis like I do, but I think what makes us unique and different is like we all have different personal interests, and we all have different backgrounds coming from whether you learn like animation or illustration or even something totally unrelated, but you have a subject that you're really interested. Let's say some of us may be super interesting mech, you know, like designing robot and cars and stuff. I think if that's where your passion is, you will focus on it more, because that brings your joy when you're creating those images that directly speaks to you. It actually, the message actually delivers to your audience. You will attract the audience that have the same interest as you. In that way, it's actually a really good cycle, because you're doing what you love to do. You're getting this kind of fulfillment, but also it's just like a reward feeling, instead of you are only posting like or doing work because it's for someone else. It's not only for yourself, if that makes sense. But yeah, here this is how my personal project come together. Lately, I've been doing some of like childhood memories. If you guys are following my Instagram account, you can probably see. That's a new idea I was thinking, because as we're growing older, especially for me, because of the whole pandemic, I couldn't go back home and visit my parents this year. It makes me feel like more nostalgic from for what I had in my childhood or what my experience was. I think it's quite different from the childhood living in the States. So I think it'll be interesting to illustrate it out before I forget. So that's a new idea. It's very personal. It speaks directly to me. We'll see where it goes. But that's an idea. So I would encourage everyone to have some sort of a project on the side. When you're not working, you can always doodling on it a little bit and just have some fun. Remember the kind of joy that when you start doodling in a class, or, you know, even during the exam behind the teacher, that kind of simple joy, that's what we're looking for. I want to talk a little bit more about the idea and mood, because as I showed briefly, I developed this method from my previous job, but I realized in my personal work, I was still using that as a habit. So for example, this image I created a while ago, you can actually see where the ideas come from. This is my dog Moji. He's a Welsh Pembroke Corgi. And we lived in San Diego back then, and our neighbor had a cat. The cat's name is Loki. It's so absurd but also fun, because they're actually the best friends. They will run around in the kids park and just have fun. So I had the idea in mind. I want to have a portrait of them too, playing together, but also I wanted to have some, like this grass field with a little bit of flower. So basically you can see my ideas and my mood here. Of course, the little flowers is what I wanted to include it in the image as well. So this is the final outcome. That is my dog, because that's a character I already created. So it's easy for me to put him in there. And the cat, I have a reference model there too. And then just put the mood together, add a little bit wildflowers on the grass. So that's basically how the ideas come together. Another example is this image. I came across an image online. It's this one. And I really like the colors, because it's just so vibrant and makes me feel like, oh, I want to do an illustration of this one. But I don't want to just directly paint those characters in my paintings, right? So what can my characters do if they're doing workout? And also find some reference that actually helps a lot, because you can see the gesture. I really like the action of line, this like backwards bending, like C curve. I think it's really important to get that pose there. So you can see in my image, this corgi is doing a similar action curve, but because it's so chubby, it's not quite there, but you get the idea, right? So that's the gesture and the color and mood. That's how this image come together. A few more examples like this one. The idea and mood is actually just from one photo, because it's like when you're looking at reference online, sometimes you just got the idea. It's like, oh, this one is actually really fun. Let me try it. Before I start an image, I never know how it's gonna end it. But usually you'll be surprised with the outcome. one more, that is a Shiba Inu, and we can see on the left side, that's the mood. It's like, I wanted this kind of sunset kind of feeling, and then the left side is more idea, because I'm not super familiar with Shiba Inu. I don't have one, so I did have to get some reference online and see what their feature is, how their face look like. And yeah, so here are my work process. I will do a live demo, but before we jump into that, I want to talk about a couple of things I usually use. You will see me use this some of the hotkeys quite often. I just want to get that out of the way, so while we're doing the demo, we don't have to deal with those questions. So I did have some customized keyboard shortcuts. It's just personal preference, I guess. But it does have a purpose. Let's say I did put, because I flip the canvas quite often to check the balance of the image. So I actually have Control F or Command F, depends on where you're using Mac or PC. That actually helps you to check the balance of the image. For example, while you're drawing, if you have a more complicated thing, sorry, it's my sketch, it's a mess, I know. But as you can see, while you're drawing, sometimes it's really helpful if you can flip the character around, because when, I don't know, like we all have like some muscle memories. We think this drawing looks great, but when you flip it, it actually looks horrible and slanted. We don't want that to happen. So while we're drawing the sketches, we just Control F to flip the canvas, actually flip the layer to check if the characters looks all right. But also I use Command Y or Control Y if you want to set that up. That's like flip the whole canvas. It's slightly slower, but in that way, you can check the whole image is balanced, not just one layer, so you have a different purpose. Smudge tool, just because it's easier to just hit right there instead of, I don't know where the smudge tool original was, but doesn't matter. And also S is the foreground color picker. I do want to talk a little bit about the color picker because you're gonna see me use that a lot. The color picker, I actually use, you know, when you click the foreground color, the color picker pops up. Usually it's set up at HSB, which is quite straightforward. You know, get darker when you slide it down. It gets brighter when you slide it up. Towards the right, it's more saturated. Towards the left, it's more desaturated. This one is great, but I think I learned the other way from one tutorial I watched years ago. I forgot where I saw that, but I started using the lab color. So when you put the selection under A, it actually gives you a different result. Okay, looking at the color picker right now, it's a mess, right? You don't know where to go, what's bright, what's going on, because it's like a weird mixture of colors. But let me explain it that way. So what we got is more of a color mixture. You could think of it as if you want a cooler color or warmer color. That's simple. So if you slide it towards to the left, that's more of a cooler color. If you want a warmer color, and just slides it towards the right. And when you go up, it's brighter. When you go down, that's darker. So let's say if we have a gray box, and we know let's put it that way, a gray box. if we have the lighting situation, we have sunlight coming from the top and maybe some few light, blue light coming from other side. So the strong sunlight, I know it's gonna lit up the top of the box, right? So what we can do is like take this color picker, you know, the sunlight is gonna be brighter, so we move it up a little bit, and sunlight, I want the sunlight to be a little bit warmer, so you pull it towards the right a little bit. So in that way, you have this color. It's not 100% accurate, but you know that's a warmer, brighter light you're gonna have. And for the side, if you just want it to be slightly darker, we move downwards a little bit and a little bit cooler. So you got this kind of cooler color for the side. So I find that's very useful, especially when you wanted to exaggerate the warm and cool a little bit more. You could always like say brighter, you could just go like diagonal upwards, and even more like this light could give you a little bit extra mix. So you can go a little bit warmer, maybe be like that. Sometimes it goes too much. It's always, you can always pull it back a little bit, but you know, it's a great way to exaggerate your light and shadow to have a more intense warm and cool contrast. So that's the thing I was gonna talk about, the color picker. And grayscale color proofing, that's just like, you know, when you sometimes hit Command Y, you actually shift the color a little bit in Photoshop. That's because you entered the same YK color profile. I don't use that often, so I changed it. So when you go to proof setup, customize, where'd that window go? Okay, here. You actually change it, you could change it to S-gray. This trick is actually my friend Gasha Arska. She told me about this. In this way, you can hit Command Y or Control Y, just toggle between grayscale mode and color mode, if you can see the difference. In this way, it actually really helped me to check my values of my image. Because like I use this lab color, it doesn't really give me a directly sense of black and white kind of contrast. So it's important for me to check the brightness by switching between the grayscale color proofing mode and the regular mode. So that's what's used for. And on top of this, let's say if you have an image that you're working on, you could also go to Window and Arrange. This option called New Window for whatever your file is called. So click that. It actually duplicates an image for you. But the good thing is, because those two files, the duplicate and the original one, are actually the same file. So what you could do with this, let me see if I can fit in one screen so you guys can see it. So when I'm working on this image, you can see this image, the duplicates actually changes too. So it's all synced. With this, you could put one image to grayscale color proofing mode. I would usually put it on a separate screen. Let's say, I'll just put on I'll just leave it here, but you get the idea. You could kind of, if you have dual monitor, you could put on this image on a separate monitor. So while you're working on that, you can kind of check if the values within the range that you liked. So I find that's very helpful, especially for me, my working habit. I don't do a black and white value sketch first. So this helped me to check my image as I was working on it. So that's another thing I wanted to show you guys. I think it's helpful to know during the process. Yeah, And also I have brush packs where you can download, and PureRef. PureRef is actually a really good software that I just started using lately. Let me show you guys if I can track. I don't know where'd it go. Okay, it's here. It's just a really simple software where you can drop all your reference image all together. But you know, you can move it, double click, zoom in and zoom out. I find it's very helpful to use it, especially you don't have to copy all the files into Photoshop when you need a reference photo. Yeah, that's just something handy. I highly recommend. I just put it on the side. But yeah, here are some things I wanted to talk about before we start the demo. Do you guys have any questions so far?
Lynn, we actually have lots of people interested in your color classes. An anonymous attendee wants to know more about what you do or practice to increase your sensibility for colors.
That's a great question. I think definitely one thing is looking for reference, even though if you have a thing you had in mind, what the picture you had in mind is not quite exactly the same as what it comes out two-dimensional. So I will look for a lot of color reference online, but also definitely going out and observe the nature. That's where everything comes from. You know, some of the pictures online looks great, it gives you great information, but also because of the image, the digital format, it doesn't capture all the spectrum of the light and color information that exists in the nature. I know a lot of my friends in LA, including me and my husband, sometimes we go out and paint. I think that's really helpful to learn how the light works. Yeah, so that helped me a lot. I think it's good to know like how the light interact with the natural environment. For example, just say like, you know, if it's sunny outside, the shadow is actually bluish, you know. It's really funny because when my husband and I were first dating, he was like, oh, today's so nice. The shadows on the floor is so blue. I was like, what are you talking about? The shadow is blue. It took me a long time to realize, yeah, that's because the sky, you know, if it's a sunny day, the sky is actually a blue dome, right? So it actually acts like a blue light generator, and all the things on the floor, on the ground, you actually get tinted in blue a little bit. So if we have a shadow, that's a little bit tinted towards blue as well. You could even go a little bit more. So if you understand how the colors in the nature works, I think that'll help you to be able to exaggerate in your own image, because you know the shadow is blue because the sky is blue. You will know that I can make the blue more intense because I really want to show how intense the light is, if that makes sense. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I think that was a great explanation. Thank you, Lynn.
Sure. All right. So here's my sketch. This sketch is actually really rough. I was thinking, yeah, I'm gonna make a whole image. I actually had some background, I have more characters, but I think for the sake of time, I'm only just gonna paint this little character. I was thinking, because you can see from my reference photo, let me drop this back here again. This is actually one of my desktop image. I've been, you know, during quarantine, you can't go anywhere. So I was having these moments, like I was just looking at those wallpaper and just zoned out. Oh, kind of follow all the little paths and stuff. It feels really relaxing. But anyways, let me zoom out. This is one of my reference image I was thinking. It's Santorini from Greece. I've never been there, really wanted to go one day, but you can see how intense the light is. Let me actually just copy it. We could try to generate the feeling, you know, when the light, it's super bright. Let me change the brush. The directly sunlight hits top of the wall, it actually kind of get overblown a little bit. But the shadow area where the sunlight doesn't directly hit, it's more blue. That's because the sky is blue, right? You kind of reflect the kind of blue from the sky. And then you can see this part, which is interesting. This part, you can see it's quite bright, but not as bright as this part. That's the bounce light. So you have the directly sunlight hits here, hits the floor here, and it bounces back a little bit on the wall, on the side. It kind of illuminates the side of the wall. So that kind of feeling, that kind of lighting situation, I really love it. So here for our character, I will try to mimic that as well. So usually I would give it the background a little bit, make it slightly darker and neutral, so we have some room for the bright sunlight on the character. I don't think I'm gonna paint the background today, just because for the sake of time, but I could show my work process. So
we have another question about your references. Minru is wondering, how long do you usually spend researching for your references?
It depends. If it's for personal work, usually not so long, because usually I have an idea of what I want. I just directly search for like sunlight, beach, or something. Things shows up, probably 5 minutes. But for work, especially some subject I'm not familiar with, it probably will take me longer. For example, probably I will spend just hours just browsing on Google or Pinterest, just to get a better idea of what I wanted to paint, especially when you haven't had the idea in mind. That takes a little bit longer. Yeah, if that makes sense. Thanks for the question. So let's see, I know I like to use more of a brushy texture color, texture brush to blocking the bigger shapes. Let me actually put my brush setting panel out. I normally keep this panel open because it gives me more flexibility for my brushes that I have. For the outline, the bigger shape, I would turn off the transfer. Yeah, that's better. So I will paint in local color first. I think the corgi, it's like an orangish kind of color. My corgi is ginger. So yeah, if I turn off the transfer, it kind of gives me more of a solid silhouette.
Lynn, I have a question for you about your brushwork. Ricardo wants to know if you worked towards the goal of having amazing brushwork, or was this more of an accidental look that you stumbled upon?
I think it's more of efficiency kind of thing, because I think, yeah, every brush have a different look, but any brush would work. This one is just like, because I had it for years, I started using it more often, and it does give me a certain look, and you can use the bigger brush to blocking shapes quite efficiently. So I've been using that more often. Sorry, it kind of gets frozen for some reason. My Photoshop is freaking out. Sorry, guys. Any other questions at the same time?
Yes, we have many questions. Nona wants to know what's some advice for students who want to do VizDev?
To VizDev, I think it's important to know, because VizDev is such a broad term, like which part of VizDev you wanted to know. Do you want to more go in towards character design, or do you want to more about like environment paintings and stuff? Because it's important to have a focus on that, but also you'll be able to do both, of course. I think it's important to look up artists who, let's say if you want to work for Disney or DreamWorks, look up artists who's already worked there and see how their work look like, you know, what their portfolio looks like. It will give you a better understanding where you're headed to, if that helps. But also, of course, doing a lot of practice and trying to get better at the things you wanted to do. That's important too. That's important as well.
We have another question from Sarah.
Sure.
They're wondering, how long do you usually spend on one illustration and how do you manage your time?
For personal work, one illustration usually takes between like an hour and a half to probably 3 or 4 hours. Depends on how complicated the scene is. Managing my time, that's hard. It's always a struggle. I find it's really helpful. Like I was saying, having an idea in mind and sketch it out while your brain is most active. For me, it's in the morning. I do like sketches and brainstorming kind of thing during the day. Later on, like painting part, it's more relaxing. I would like leave it till end of the day, so it's more like a cool down kind of sketch. But during the day, I definitely focus on work a little bit more. But also, it's hard to avoid like spending too much time on an image. I guess using this brush, there is a good thing about using this brush or any bigger brush, because you're forcing yourself to avoid going too much into details. In that way, you're saving some time from like noodling on the image too much, because sometimes for personal work, you're not really it's more about get the idea out, get your brain to be more active, and it's not necessarily doing 100% like pretty image every time. So I think in order to manage your time better, you need to know what your purpose of doing an image and know when to stop. That, for me, that's very important. Yeah. So right now I'm just blocking in the bigger shapes. I do use clip layers, like the white fur part. I will just clip under the main shape. And erase some of the parts I don't need.
Lynn, we have lots of interest in your brushes. Loretta wants, or she says, all of your paintings are so consistent in style and quality. Do you use the same brushes to paint each time?
Mostly, yes, because you know sometimes we have like over 100 brushes, but you ended up always looking for the one brush that you commonly use. So to me, that's kind of, you know, it's not very efficient. I was learning a lot about efficiency from my husband, because he was telling me, you know, you don't really need those brushes. So I ended up just deleting all the brushes that I don't use. Only the brushes that I feel like, yeah, I know I can get a good use out of it, I will keep it. So yeah, I basically just use 2 or 3 brushes when I'm painting, mostly. But of course, depends on the project. Sometimes there are certain look we wanted to get, we use certain kind of brush. But for personal work, it's just like I use one pencil drawing. This pencil is like really soft. It kind of allows me to do a lot of like loose sketches. And this brush, I use it for blocking shapes. Usually I tap on and off the transfer to get a little bit of a different look. And another brush is this square one. So this square brush, it kind of gives you a harder edge as well when you're painting it. If it's less of a very fluffy surface, it's more solid, I will use the square brush. So let's check the black and white. I know I wanted the background to be a little bit brighter, and my subject is a little bit darker. So when you check the black and white value, it kind of goes with that. So I will keep it that way. I think over time, my character just gets simpler and simpler because I feel like, I don't know if you guys know this, when I first start drawing my corgis, they have eyes, like actually eyes with iris and stuff and like that. But right now they're just a little dots now, because I feel like if I can if I can deliver the expression within one stroke, I wouldn't spend many more strokes to try to tackle that. So that's also about efficiency. Okay, one more about the.
Lynn, Isabella asks, do you often want to switch up your main character, or do you always stick with corgis and hamsters?
I do switch up a little bit. It depends. It depends on what my inspiration is. Let's say sometimes I feel I wanted to do. I was watching a documentary of wild animal. I think that's a fun subject. I would do that particular animal I wanted to explore, to learn a little bit more. But a lot of times when I don't have an idea, or I just mindless doodling, sometimes I would just do corgis, because it's like a safe subject you can always fall back on. You know, when you don't feel like very creative, you know, you have a personal project that you're already familiar with, just fall back on it. It's a safe zone. You could just relax and enjoy, and until you feel like, oh, I want to venture out a little bit more, so let's try something else. So I think that's my process. So I think that's about the major shapes that I wanted to have there. Let's look at the reference image we have here. Bright sunlight feeling. Okay, now after I blocked in all the major shapes, let's say daylight. I know I have a bright sunlight coming from the top. I will use my lab color picker and just go really bright for the sunlight. Maybe a little bit warmer. It doesn't need to be perfect. I usually just paint it in. This time you could think about painting the light is more like sculpting. You're really thinking about one light source at one time, like which part of the surface is hit by the sunlight, and just only focus on that. Let me touch up the white hair part a little bit, this part.
Lynn, Monica wants to know, what is the canvas size you're working on?
For my personal project, usually it's 3K by 3K at 300 dpi. Because sometimes I do print it out as prints. So yeah, 3K. That's the sunlight. Let's pretend I'm planning out my lighting. this is the sunlight. And if it's a bright floor, you probably have some bounce light too. Bounce. And you know, I know it's like a bright blue sky, so you probably have fill light from the sky. So that's three major light source I was thinking about. So we're painting just one light source at a time. We paint in the sunlight, but I do wanna paint different part of the hair differently. So I'm treating the white hair part slightly different. And right now I feel, yeah.
Walter says, I notice you're left-handed and I'm left-handed. Does this affect your workflow, especially with using shortcuts that seem to be made for right-handed use?
I'm actually right-handed. I don't know if it that's because my wrist got yeah, but I think that's a good question. I think the good thing about most of the program is that you could customize all the shortcuts that you want. For me, I did have, because some of the keys are on the right side of the keyboard. For me, that's too far away to reach there, and I actually get joints pain if I reach over too much. So I moved all the common shortcuts that I usually use to the left side for keyboard shortcuts. But I think if you're left-handed, if you feel like it's too hard to reach certain parts, you could change it over. It just takes some setup, if that makes sense. And I think Photoshop and many other programs, you could keep all the setup as a preset. And then if you're working on a different computer or you have to reinstall your software for some reason, you could import your preset, and that helps you to set things up quicker if you have a lot of modification of your shortcuts and stuff. So that's my direct sunlight. I do wanna add a little bit ambient occlusion. This time I would turn my transfer back on just to get a little bit softer feeling.
I have another question for you, Lynn.
Yes.
Lacey wants to know, how different was the shift from physical painting to digital painting for you?
Oh, it's so different, I feel. But I believe painting more traditionally would help your digital work, and the other way, vice versa, you know. For me, because I didn't come from a traditional painting background, it's harder for me to get used to the media. I was trying to go outside and do gouache painting with friends, but it's so hard. I would still suggest definitely if you can go outside and paint with traditional media as much as possible, because the way you're using brush, your actual physical brush, and it actually would help you think more about how you can improve your digital work in a way. But yeah, I can't speak too much about it because I feel my traditional painting, that area, I'm still very lacking, but I'm glad that question got brought up because I do think it's very helpful understanding the light and color better in a traditional format. Right now I'm brushing in the skylight. So it's like sculpting. Think about where the form is facing upwards will get affected by the skylight a little bit more. You know, the area where the sunlight hits definitely gonna wash out a lot of the blue because the intensity of the sunlight. But where the sunlight doesn't hit, that's the blue skylights play a huge part. So right now I'm picking the local color. It's more of an orange tone. I want it to be slightly brighter actually, because it got lit from above and slightly cooler. So it shifts towards this purple tone. It could be really soft and just a hint of this color. Just brush it in.
Lynn, Gloria wants to know if there's any artists, traditional or digital, that inspire you for your colors or themes.
Oh my God, there's so many. That's a hard question. I feel like digitally, you know, Tonko House, Robert Condon and Daisy Chizumi, they have a like a color and light painting class on Schoolism. That's actually really helpful. That's where I learned to break down the lighting from like key light, bounce light, and field light. So you don't have to worry about all the lighting at the same time. I think that helps me a lot. But you know, there are so many good digital artists out there. Like my husband's work always inspires me, and you know, I like. It's so hard to come like right top of my head right now, but I could make a list of artists that I like later on after the stream if you guys are interested. But also for traditional artists, you know, I was actually thinking about Tommy Kim. I think that's his name. He's an artist living in LA. I was actually wanted to go to a show of his. He does this amazing gouache painting, and just like this street scene from LA or other parts of the world. I think the way he uses colors is just really vibrant and warm. That's what I really love. But you know, a lot of like more classic, older oil painters, that's always, their work is always good to look at and learn from as well.
Lynn, we are at the top of the hour. I just wanted to do a check-in with you. Are you good to keep going?
Yeah, we could keep going a little bit more.
Awesome.
So right now I'm just adding a little bit blue on top of his nose. And I want this really intense sunlight hitting his nose like that. Some of the ambient occlusion, a little dark corner where the sunlight doesn't hit. When light is bouncing around the environment, it kind of doesn't get as much over here, like in the little cracks and corners, so it's gonna be darker.
We have a question from Gabriella. As a fellow dog lover, you make your dogs look like little cartoons. What tip would you give when it comes to proportions and facial expressions?
That's a great question. I think when you have a pet, you kind of understand his or her personality a lot more, and you will be able to interpret his or her emotion in a cartoon way. Because like, let's say if I can show my dog, that would be great. He's somewhere sleeping, but he does have like a really derpy face, always smile really wide. And I think it's, I think it comes down to simplify it. When you're trying to simplify a subject, you first of all, you have to kind of know it really well, know where to simplify. So I would actually go just draw and paint. Let's say if you have a cat or dog, just go draw it over time and time, get familiar with the format the forms and know how a dog is put together in a way. And then when you're getting more familiar with the subject, you will be able to know where to simplify and where to exaggerate. Let's say I know my corgi have big ears. Over the time, his ear just get bigger and bigger. I know his body is chubby and stubby, and over time, it just gets more stubby in a way. Why does keep going up? Oh, okay. All right. Let me just move down a sec. And a little bit skylight. So right now it's mostly there, but I do wanna suggest a little bit of a bounce light, because if you are having a really bright light on the floor, let's say something like that, and your shadow is a little bit, let's say because we said the skylight is blue, so it's more towards that. Foreshadow, ambient. Maybe the sunlight will actually go around behind him. So this part of sunlight on the ground, too bright. This part, yeah, let me change the color. Like sunlight hit this part, it will actually bounce back a little bit. But intensity is not as strong as the directly sunlight, of course. So I would, I know I was talking, it's more about sculpting, right? So this, his cheek, like this part, it's gonna get hit by the bounce light because it's like facing towards the ground. But the color will be, I know it's gonna be slightly brighter, but not as intense as the sunlight. So I would just move it up a little bit, but I know it's gonna be warmer. So I just move towards right a little bit and maybe a little bit red. And then just brushing gently a little bit of a bright color. So we have a little bit bounce light there. I think it's important to keep your whole image consistent. Let's say if you have a blue blue skylight on this part of the hair, that's how much you went on this color slider. Then keep it consistent, because the white part of the hair, you need to have the same amount of intensity of the brightness increase. Does that make sense? So your image will look like all together. It won't get too out of place. And double check your value. I kind of want to keep this bright sunlight a little bit stronger, like that. You could just adjust it, because the sunlight, like this part, I put on a separate layer, so it's easier for me to adjust it if it needs to be exaggerated a little bit more. A little bit of the subsurface scattering.
Alex wants to know, when planning out a painting, what's the best way to sketch it out, on paper or digitally? Or is that up to what the artist feels most comfortable doing?
I think it's definitely up to the artist. If you're more familiar, or if you feel more comfortable drawing on paper, it's more about like get ideas out, right? If that's what you're more comfortable with, definitely go for that. Unless you're trying to practice drawing on paper or practice drawing digitally, then you're forcing yourself to use a different media. But I think if you just want to get ideas out, definitely use the media that you're more familiar with. Yeah. So that is the sunlight version. So we're at 1 o'clock. I could do a different color version. You guys up for that? We'll have a little bit time.
Yeah, and we can also answer a few more questions if you want.
Yeah.
Melissa is asking, what advice would you give to someone who can't find their corgi, who struggles to find something to draw?
Find other corgis, find other people's corgis. Just kidding. I think you should just try to draw what you feel most in love with. You know, if you have plants, you like your plants, you can draw that too. If you do love animals, but you don't have one, I would say, yeah, there's like videos online, reference pictures online. You can always look for that. Sometimes I would just go on YouTube and just watch corgi or cat videos. It's relaxing, right? But you can also get some inspirations as well. Okay, let's do a different color setting. It's one of my other screensaver is I have it right there. I do like the atmosphere, like when the sun is setting, when the lights light up. I think it's quite fun. So I'm gonna use the same sketch, but I do wanna get a general mood in there first. So I wanted to have a little bit of a sunset tone. This is a square brush I was talking about. Actually, let me do this. When I was working my previous job, when I first started, you know, the project, because the way they wanted the artwork to be, I always use a very just like a brush, airbrush, like round airbrush brush to just paint everything. I didn't know color vibration. I didn't add too much like color changes in the image. There's one time actually Nathan Fowkes, he came into our studio and did a demo and did a talk. And I was very lucky and was talking with him, asking his advice, showing him some of my artwork. I remember the advice he gave it to me, just like, you know, you could add a little bit more color variation there. Like, what color variations? What you talking about? Not until later, you know, it's like, yeah, you could have a little bit warm and cool contrast in there, you know, when you're having, let's say, like the background right now, when you check the black and white value, it's actually pretty much the same, but I was really just trying to put the warm and cool tone like together to give a little bit more complexity in the background, if that makes sense.
Lynn, what recommendations do you have for showcasing your portfolio outside of social media?
You mean like going to a job interview or like an event showing portfolio?
I think they just mean online.
Okay. Don't put everything on there. If you have a portfolio website, only choose your best pieces. I've seen some students would put all their artwork on there, including some really rough sketches, which is nice. I think it's nice to have you're doing sketches, studies, but that shouldn't be the main focus. You know, if you have one or two studies, sketches, that's fine, but make sure that's obvious enough. That's, you know, that's not your main focus. I would have just like 5 to 6 pieces of your best artwork in there. Also, definitely keep it up. If you have new artwork, you think that's better, replace it. Take out some of the older ones. I think that's what I would do. Also, avoid. Also, I think it's important to show what you're interested in. Let's say if you want to do background, you definitely want to have much more stronger background paintings in your portfolio. Having characters, maybe 1 or 2, showing that you understand it, but that it's not your preference, I think it's great to know like where your passion is, what you wanted to do through your portfolio. And right now I'm gonna painting the same process, but you know, I kind of have the more purplish kind of background tone there. I want the whole scene to be a little bit warmer. Remember, we had like a more orange tone in the daytime, but right now I want this corgi to have, because the light is less intense now, I think the orange tone under the influence of the purple sky, it gets shifted towards more like bluish purple. So even when the local color should be somewhere around here, it actually goes back down a little bit darker, a little bit cooler. That's where we get this this cooler orange color. I think it's more, I don't know. I can't describe what kind of color is this, but you get the idea.
Tahira wants to know, do you use a Cintiq Pro?
I do use Wacom Cintiq 22-inch right now. I have the Wacom Cintiq Pro 16-inch a while ago. Yeah, I do really love it. I think most of the tablet I've been using from Wacom, it's just really great. I was joking with my friend, you know, that what the great thing about all the tablets I've been using is that, you know, with Wacom tablet, you don't really feel it because it's just such a natural part of the working process. Like as a tool, it just helps you to fulfill whatever you wanted to do. You're not struggling with it too much. While you are having your creative process, you're not thinking too much about, oh, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. Everything works really smooth. So yeah. I don't think this is the Cintiq Pro, is it? Is the new Cintiq 22?
I think you have the Cintiq 22, not the Pro version. Jen says, you mentioned efficiency and knowing when to stop working on an image. How did you get to the point of letting go and allowing the image to be finished versus continuing to work on it?
It depends your purpose. Hold on, let me get this white hair part. Yeah, I think it depends on your purpose of doing this image. Let's say if you wanna draw out an idea, if your idea is told, if the story is told, that's when you can stop. It doesn't need to like really render it out perfectly, like each hair, each brush stroke, because that could take forever. I think, yeah, if you're just telling a story, you could just do line work and flat color. If the story is told, I think that's good enough. Same with, let's say, if you want to study a lighting situation. So once the light and mood is there, is where you want it to be. Let's say we wanted the sun side kind of warm lighting. Once you hit that, I think it's good to stop. If that helps. Especially during the day, you know, maybe you have a lot of class, you have a full-time job. It really doesn't leave you much time to do personal work. So I wouldn't finish every image perfectly, because you could always spend more time polishing an image, but does that help you to improve the lighting, improve the color, improve the mood, or does it help to improve the storytelling? If the more time you're spending on that, but it doesn't do any of those things, I don't think it's necessary to keep going. You could just leave it there. Even though it's not perfect, you know, if it's just for practice, you could just let it go. And in that way, we're not like taking our work too precious. You know, it's like, I put this out there, but I don't know if it's good enough. But as long as you're having fun with the image, that's good enough.
Andy wants to know, what was the hardest part working in the industry and how do you handle it?
The hardest part working in the industry. How to get better, I guess. That's the hardest thing. I feel it's definitely a blast working in the industry because you get so inspired by your coworkers. But it's also hard, you know, like knowing that there are always better artists out there, and how can you improve yourself? How can you keep it going, not to stop where you're at right now? I think that's the hard part. And also keep a work-life balance. That's really hard for me as well. I feel it's constantly a struggle. But I feel, yeah, I don't know, like for the solution part, I feel we're all on the same boat. We're all figuring things out. Trying to get better by doing a lot more practice on the side. Balance your work a little bit more, leaving a little bit time for yourself to explore, do personal work, not only just work, you know. I think that's the hard part, but it's also very valuable to keep it up. I don't know if does that answer the question?
I think so.
So right now we're having more of a purplish tone. Same here. I was just brushing ambient occlusion very quick. Give a little bit dimension, three-dimensional feeling. So for example, like this demo we're doing today, we're not trying to make a pretty image, but I just want to get the idea across that you could paint light individually. You don't have to putting everything all together. Just think about one light source at one time. And doing it more like a 3D sculpting, you know, like this part is facing downwards, so it's slightly darker, and the other part is brighter. Just go through all that.
Lynn, are you self-taught or did you study art?
I did study art. So my undergrad, I was in China. I majored in animation. So I was learning a lot of software like Maya and stuff. But back then, you know, the school in China doesn't really teach you much. I didn't know, like, okay, in school you're just supposed to learn how you can learn from yourself, doing research and stuff. But I guess it's a good practice, like knowing a lot of the software, like 3D actually helped me a lot, thinking format three-dimensionally. But of course, in my college, we had a lot of fundamental practice as well, like life drawing and stuff. And then for grad school, I went to MICA, Maryland Institution College of Art. That's in Baltimore. I think that was a great experience because, to be honest, for me, I didn't know what I wanted to do from the very beginning. I know, like, my husband, Jeremy, is like, he wanted to be a concept artist since high school. What I was doing in high school, I have no idea. I didn't even know visual development was a thing until I got to the States. I feel like, oh, you can making art for animation and games. That's so cool. So I think coming here, especially grad school, it taught me to like learn what you really wanted to do and go for it. As long as you put in the time and efforts, you could actually get there. You know, you have all the freedom to to chase your dream, to do what you feel you wanted to do as your career. I think that's very important for me. But yeah, I was majoring illustration in grad school. The thing is, like, because it was on East Coast, illustration is actually very heavily focused on editorial illustration or children's book. For a long time, I thought I wanted to do children's book. That's what I wanted to do. But I realized I really enjoy spending time on lighting and storytelling. Children's book is still a thing I wanted to do, maybe at some point. But right now, I feel like focusing on like just small illustration networks too. Also, I feel I'm very grateful that in my grad school, although it's heavily focused on editorial illustration or children's book, it does give you a lot of freedom to explore the direction where you think illustration could take you. For example, I did, like, my thesis project was actually a animated storybook on the iPad. So I was doing animation, I was doing illustration. So it's like a lot of things get to put together, like all your skills, however you want to use it, just to put together and create something. I think that was really fun. Just how much freedom you have to create the artwork you wanted to create. Okay. For this image, I wanted to have, so we have all the street lights from all the buildings. So let's just say I want a warmer street lights coming from behind, like this direction. And we still have purple skylight coming from where he's facing. He's sitting on the cliff. Street light, skylight. Let's do the street light first.
An anonymous attendee wants to know, how do you deal with the fear of failure?
Don't be afraid. Failure is part of it. I don't know. I think that's a good question because, not every image you put out there will be your best image. I feel like it's important to know, like, this is not the last one. You always have a second chance. You can always do better next time. Knowing that, there's nothing to be afraid of. I don't know about failure, but I know we always have up and downs in our life. I think that's just a general attitude, it's like, yeah, it doesn't work out this time. Let's try it again next time. There's no big deal about it. I don't know what kind of failure we're talking about, but I think no matter what the situation is, there's always a way out. Sometimes failure could lead to other opportunities as well. I don't have a specific example, but I feel like when you are at the lowest point, that's actually a really good opportunity to find breakthrough. Just for example, when I was trying to do personal work, but I couldn't do anything, that was really hard. But knowing that whatever you do, it can be worse. There's nothing to lose. I feel like that kind of attitude kind of helps me get through whatever. How bad it could be, right?
I think that's some great advice. Lynn, we are coming up at 1:30. I just want to do a check-in with you. Do you want to keep going until you're finished with this?
Yeah, I think I don't need much time. This is, they'll be done probably in 5 or 6 minutes.
No problem. Take your time.
Yeah, if there's any more questions, we could definitely go for that. If there are any questions about certain techniques or anything, feel free.
Another Lynn wants to know, how do you deal with roadblocks and concepts that are unfamiliar to you?
Ooh, hi, Lynn. Research, definitely research, especially a subject that you're not familiar with. Go online, you know, every information is out there. Try to get familiar with the subject. Let's say when I'm painting animals, some animals I'm just not so familiar with because I feel like that's my part. I didn't do enough study. But, you know, before you dive into the subject, you can always do more study to get yourself prepared in that situation. Let's intensify this a little bit more.
Walter wants to know, regarding color, are you concerned about the color accuracy that a display or monitor is showing, or as long as the colors across multiple devices look consistent, it's okay?
I don't consider that as much. I guess I just trust my 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 device, Cintiq, and I use Mac. I think the color is very accurate. But yeah, that does happen. Sometimes I see the image on a different device. It looks very different. But I feel like that's just hard to avoid. As long you know your fundamental is right, your lighting theory is right, where your comparison, like the warm and cool, the contrast is right there, and where your darkness don't go too dark, your brightness don't go too bright, it doesn't break the value structure, I think you're good. Every monitor, it's always going to be slightly different, but it shouldn't change things fundamentally. As long your your basic value structure is there, you should be good. But when it comes to printing, that's slightly different. I was printing a personal project book last year. It was really hard to tell because each printer is different and they use different color profile. So it's always good to have test print and see how far away, how far off, and how you can adjust it early on, leaving enough time for yourself to do that. I think that helps.
Amber wants to know, what do you recommend to do work on line control and building up steadiness of your hand for drawing?
Line control, oh boy. I guess that's a personal preference thing. Like for me, my lines are really loose. Sometimes my sketches is hard to show to clients and say, hey, this is my sketch, because it's all like scribbles, doodles. But if you want to have a steady hand to do line work, I would say just practice it more. Try to use your elbow instead of your wrist, because using your elbow, like keep your wrists steady and just do longer lines and practicing the control of it. And also a trick, you know, you could always turn on the smoothing in Photoshop. Yeah, that's a way too. That's cheating though. I think if you want to steady hands, definitely just try to draw more lines. Just practice. Practice makes everything better. I kind of want to blocking a little bit of the background if we have time for that.
Sure, go for it. Karen wants to know, how long did it take you to properly learn how to use Photoshop and the tools?
I actually don't know. I've been using Photoshop for a long time. I think it's, I don't know, few months to few years. It's hard to say because it really depends on the project you're working on. If you're learning from school, you know, Photoshop has so many functions, like it's gonna be very different if you're doing illustrations versus if you're using Photoshop for, like this, say, photo editing. So it's really hard to get through all of it all at once. You know, it's such a big program. but I think it's fairly easy to get used to once you know the hotkeys, once you know all the functions you wanted to use. It won't take too long. I think what it takes long is just you have to practice and to get used to it and know how to get more familiar with it. I think the thing with Photoshop is like I thought I know it after first couple months using it, just like, yeah, I learned it. I know how to erase the thing. I know how to save it. I know some of the basic stuff. I thought I'm good. But later on, like I've been using Photoshop for years, and then I realized, oh, there's something I didn't know. This thing is actually really cool, blah, blah, blah. I never know it exists. And plus all the software, they keep updating, you know, they have all the new features coming out each update. That takes time to catch up with it too. So I wouldn't worry about like how long it'll take you to learn one software. As long you know this one software you're using, it works for what you needed. I think that's good. That's a good start. You will always learn more as time goes by if you keep using the software. So yeah.
Alyssa wants to know, do you use filters like overlay or multiply, or do you set your lights manually?
I don't use that anymore. I think I would, when I first start working, to get more like a quick kind of result for the game I was working on, I definitely use that. But I do realize sometimes it flatten out my image quite a bit. And right now I try to be more aware of the color I'm actually picking and using instead of just color adjusting it. So I would try to avoid using, let's say, blending mode or adjusting it too much. Because I feel like if you're practicing learning colors, you should just trying to get it right with the right selection of your colors and values. Of course, you can still use it if you're trying to finish an image to give it a better look. Definitely go for it. And right now, I know I could stop. I could just leave the character there, but I want to give it a little bit of environment. But I don't want to spend too much time painting every leaves, because that's not the focal point. That's not the story I wanted to tell. I just want something there suggesting the mood and the mood and yeah, the mood.
Lynn, an anonymous attendee wants to know how it looks in grayscale right now.
Let's see, let me flip the image and let's check. So in grayscale, I still know like my sky is still bright. I want to have a separation from the background and foreground. See, it's actually a great suggestion. I feel like my foreground could be a little bit darker. That's the time when I would use some like adjustment to like different layers to get a quick fix on things, but not necessarily color dodge or those. Those could be handy too, but I feel like that's like icing on a cake, right? You shouldn't using it too much. Only maybe till end of the image, give a little bit boost, maybe a little bit shadow here.
An anonymous attendee wants to know, do you have advice for creating a portfolio to apply for art college?
Portfolio for art college. Yeah, like put your best put your best artwork in there. I think it also depends on which program you're applying for. definitely do some research. Each program would say they have a different focus, and say if you're trying to get into like industry design, definitely showing something like fundamental, like perspective and drawings and stuff like that. If you want to get into illustration or other things, I feel like art college, definitely they would look at your fundamentals, but also your understanding of where you wanted to go for your career. What's your purpose of going in the program? I think that should reflect in your portfolio somewhat as well. For example, my college, my grad school, because my college is a bit different. It's like, I know I want to do illustration, like book illustration. So I had some artwork for like a picture book I did a while ago. It never came out, but it's still like, I think that best represent what I wanted to do. I will put that in there. So yeah, that's something you definitely want to do. And also, like, before you apply to school, doing some research, see if any artists you know or you can find online went to that college. Maybe reach out and ask for some advices as well, because each school is slightly different, I think. Want to add a little bit color variations in the background and wrap it up.
Lynn, I wanted to tell you, my mom is watching right now. She's tuning in and she just texted me, I want to do this now.
Yeah, that'll be great. We should draw together. Aw, thank you. Yeah, just add a little bit blue there. Maybe a couple dome shape. Hopefully it's not too much.
Guru wants to know, how did you decide on a style?
I think the style comes later. I think let me think about it. I don't think I was trying to go for a certain style. It's just, I think the style comes to you after years of practice. I think it's helpful to know where you want it to go as you're getting closer to that direction. Looking up artists that you really like with the style that you had in mind, but also mixed with certain things that speaks to you, so you're not completely just copying one artist for the sake of style. I think it definitely takes time for you to find your own voice in the terms of style. There's nothing. I think you shouldn't force it too much. I think as long as you feel whatever you're painting or drawing makes sense for the image, it'll all work. So I wouldn't worry about the style too much. Yeah.
As you're coming to a finish, I have a great question for you. What do you love most about being an artist?
That's a great question. I think it's so hard to say one thing that I really like, but I think the creativity, the many possibilities of things you could do with your ability. I think that's really great. You know, you can tell a story from doing an image and share the kind of joy or fun or any kind of emotion through your image. I think that's a great privilege being an artist. Like for me, I was posting artwork on Instagram a lot of times. Just I have these silly ideas, or my dog is doing silly things, I turn into an illustration and put online. And I think the greatest comment, I feel like people would say, your image makes me feel so happy. And I think that kind of reaction makes me feel so happy as well, because I feel like you definitely wanna give something good to your audience, and was able to do that through creating image, that's just the best part. I think that's about it. It's not exactly the same as my reference image. It's much darker, but I definitely like the kind of like a pastel kind of mood. In the end, sometimes I would boost the saturation a little bit just to give a little bit extra color contrast. But this kind of adjustment is really subtle. It shouldn't affect the overall image. Yeah. You guys have any final questions or?
That looks great, Lynn. I love the colors you used. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here with us, Lynn. This was awesome. And you answered a lot of great questions too.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really great to be here. Thank you guys all for coming, and thank you for all the great questions. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody, for attending. I'm going to share my screen one last time with our promo codes. Here we go. Everybody have a great day. Thank you so much for attending.
Thanks. Bye, guys.